Thank you all for joining the Owasco Watershed Lake Association's April Public Forum. We are so pleased to have some excellent presenters with us tonight. We'll be talking on modern dairy farms here in New York. Before we get started though, because of the size of the group, just a little housekeeping. What our intent is to have our presenters go through the materials that they have. Then we will have the question and answers. But again, because there are over 75 people registered, we thought the best way to approach this is if you would please enter your questions within the chat box. After the presentations are done, we will then begin to address the questions to our presenters. And we felt that that would be a very good manner in keeping a good flow with what we have today. So I appreciate you doing that. Also put yourself on mute while you're listening. So tonight we have quite a diverse group of panelists here representing the Pro Dairy with Cornell University's Cooperative Extension. We have Partners for Healthy Watershed with some major I call them players, big farms in the community. They are at cutting edge technology. The group that we have, you will find that they're advocates where they are environmentally sustainable, economically feasible. They are looking at nutrient management solutions within our watershed. They're applying a lot of best management practices that we're interested in hearing about. We have representatives here that are third generation farmers. We have representatives tonight that are New York State award winners, Business of the Year award by the New York State Agricultural Society. So we have some individuals that are well recognized and they do represent this industry within the area. I would like to introduce Kirsten Workman. She is with Cornell Cooperative Extension. She is a senior extension agent in nutrient management and environmental sustainability. And Kirsten, if you could go right ahead and start. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Anne. We really appreciate you inviting Partners for Healthy Watersheds here tonight. I am just your host for the evening, and I'll be introducing you to our guests of honor who will be presenting the material here in just a few minutes. And Anne did a great job of introducing Partners for Healthy Watersheds. You'll learn more about the organization and the kinds of farmers and groups that they work with. They're very much centered, here in your watersheds in the Finger Lakes. And the partnering organizations that make up Partners for Healthy Watersheds are the American Dairy Association Northeast, New York Animal Agriculture Coalition, the Cayuga County Farm Bureau, and the Northeast Dairy Producers Association. They often, as they tackle issues related to water quality and nutrient management in the watersheds, reach out to technical service providers like myself, and you'll also probably hear from Jason Oliver, my colleague at Pro Dairy, as well as Cayuga County Cornell Cooperative Extension and the Cayuga Soil and Water Conservation District, among others. So we're really glad to be here tonight. And just to get us started, I wanted to, first I want to make my slides work. There we go. In my career, I have been really honored to work with and for producers who are doing an amazing job as environmental stewards. And one of the things as I sort of navigate through public meetings and the like is I like to remind folks and all of us here in the room that the farmers, not just on this call, but many farmers in our watersheds really care, and they're just one of us, right? So while not all of us are as attached to farming as we used to be in our history, and that seems like something kind of far off in a way, I just want to remind us all that the folks you're going to hear from tonight are your neighbors, right? They're often your colleagues. They volunteer in community service groups. They might be school board members or select people, council members. They often volunteer for the fire department. They're clearly business owners, but they're also scientists, innovators, food producers, conservationists, and really are compassionate stewards of their animals, of their staff and people, and of their land and water. And I really love the logo you can see on the screen in front of you. That's from Patterson Farms. And that's on the farm, it's on their sweatshirts, it's on their hats when they're around the farm, that those are really their priorities on the farm. So just a reminder, right, that farmers care about the landscape like we all do, and they also are our watershed residents and lake neighbors. So they really have stepped up, they're working hard, and I think we're all on the same team. So with that, right, tonight Anne asked us to really cover all parts of the farm. And so the way we think about that, right, is we're going to start with the cows, and we have Dan Westfall who will join us from Aurora Ridge Dairy, and he's going to talk about how we manage our cows and how that sort of impacts our environmental footprint. Greg Raymond from Sunnyside Farms, he's going to help us understand how farms handle manure and that resource on the farm, also in the context of environmental sustainability and water quality. And then you'll get to hear from Kelly O'Hara from Oakwood Dairy about the kinds of things we're doing with soil health in our fields as we grow the crops to feed those cows on the dairy farm. And then we have lots of time for question and answers from you all. And that's why Jason and I are here to help answer some of those questions. But really the three farmers that are going to present to you today, and we might even have a handful more on the call listening in, we'll probably pitch in to help answer any questions as we move along. So we really appreciate the time. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to Dan.
All right, good evening, everybody. Dan Westfall from Aurora Ridge Dairy. Just want to talk about how we care for the cows and how that can kind of be used to help maintain the environment. Of course, we're making the manure and the milk that's getting used every day. So just want to point out some of the kind of the improvements that have happened with our organizations over time. So the first graph there that's showing the milk per cow, that's shown in pounds per year, just a change between 2007 and 2017. So we measure all the milk produced per cow in pounds, and those coordinate to about 2,300 gallons per cow per year. And now in that 2017, it's gone up 14% to 2650, probably some of these farms closer to 3,500 gallons per cow per year. So our production has increased significantly over time with better management, better facilities, better genetics in the cows. So the increased production translates into reductions and a lot of things that you would think as far as inputs for those cows. So the second chart there is showing per unit of milk. Total feedstuffs have been down 17% in that 10-year period. Nitrogen fertilizer used almost 20%. Phosphorus and potassium 25%. Herbicides and insecticides are use is down. Fossil fuel use is down. Total water used, and then manure is all down. So been able to reduce quite a few of our inputs at the same time that we're increasing production per cow. So healthy cows are productive cows. More the more healthful the cows can be, the more milk that they're going to give per cow. As a manager, we want to provide everything a cow needs without wasting anything at all. So try to keep from using excess nutrients to the cow. So anything not needed from a cow is just an unnecessary expense financially, but also not utilized by the cow, and then that's going to get passed through in urine or manure. And some some nutrients or inputs could be harmful to the cows. So try to reduce as much of the inputs as we can. And then, for on the animal care side, we're trying to measure what the animal's going to need for optimum performance, make sure that we're using all the inputs efficiently, efficient in providing the nutrients she's going to need, and then precision. We'll talk a little bit later about the things we're doing for good measurements and prudent use of all the inputs that we use on the farm. Here's just an example. So dietary phosphorus, feeding phosphorus to a cow. A chart showing, a study that showed you hit a point of diminishing returns with any inputs on the cow. So, feeding a cow more phosphorus isn't going to translate into better production. Actually, you can see here with this graph, your milk yield goes down a little bit with increased phosphorus. So many of these things we're trying to measure and make sure that we're not overfeeding or over applying a lot of different things to these cows. So some inputs, minerals, this is just showing lists of things that we try to monitor on the cows so that we're not overfeeding. But as far as excessive exposure and having some negative impacts, so cobalt, iodine, manganese, magnesium, those type of things can have some low impact issues with cows. Some of the things, calcium, iron, things like that are medium impact. And then certain things we're trying to monitor really closely, copper, molybdenum, selenium, salt, and selenium or sulfur are inputs on cows that we try to monitor really closely, because certainly feeding more is wasteful, but it also could be just not good for the cow and her health. Here is sort of a busy chart to look at. There's a lot there, but what that picture is showing is the Cornell net carbohydrate and protein system. So CNCPS is the way we refer to it. That's showing the inputs. So primarily the feed intake there for the cow, and then what processes are going on in her body that result. You can see at the top there, carbon dioxide and methane excretion. Obviously the milk, the white arrows coming from her udder. So the energy allowed milk, protein allowed milk, amino acid balance, all coming out of the milk. And then at the back end of the cow, manure. So nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, everything that's coming out the cow on the other end. So there's, like I said, there's a lot there, but it is complicated. And, the nutritionists are professionally using this model to be able to kind of show, how to feed that cow the best, and using the model improves the health of the cow by decreased acidosis. So if the acidity of her rumen is too low, causes some issues, decreased laminitis, so lameness in cows, and then decreased metabolic diseases when you utilize this model correctly. So that feeding the cow efficiently and well, according to this, improves your income over feed costs. So feed costs is a big input on the farms, and getting the best production with the most efficient use of feed is really important to us. And you can model this to make sure that you're reducing the nitrogen and phosphorus excretion. So certainly don't need to produce more of that than we need. Then you're improving the animal performance by milk. If it's a meat animal, growing heifers, the young cows, as efficiently as possible. Improving milk components. So the biggest components being fat and protein that are in the milk. So with good utilization of this model, then you'll get the best production of the fat and protein. And then it's been able to kind of show the best quality forage that you get into that cow, the best production that you'll get out of it. So it puts a lot of stress on making sure that we're putting up really high-end forages, growing good crops for those cows. So the care of the cows is obviously the most important to me every day, taking care of these cows. Of course, we want what's best for the herd. Happy cows are going to make the most milk. And we're looking for the optimum management practices, procedures, protocols that are designed and followed by the caretakers that have hands-on cows every day. So we work with the veterinarian to make sure the protocols are designed and followed correctly, using the best animal management procedures. So best way to treat those cows to make sure that they're comfortable and nice and cool and warm when they need to be, and treated really well. Work with a vet to develop a vaccination program and other health recommendations to make sure that we're doing all the right things to keep the cows healthy, and then having the right care guidelines. So what are the operating procedures if you find a cow that has gotten sick, or how do you treat her correctly to make sure that she recovers and gets back into being a good, healthy animal. And then we've got regular veterinary farm visits to maintain the herd health. So at our farm, the vet comes every Tuesday, does a walk through the herd, checks on any sick cows that we're looking at, checks on the baby calves, And then is just available whenever we need her to help us with treatments or recommendations on what we should be looking at or things that we need to improve. So that chart is kind of small there down at the bottom, but that's just showing a treatment record that we would use to track the individual cows, what day she's getting treated, which group she's from, the condition that we're trying to treat. We always keep track of what antibiotics we're using, the dosage, route of administration, who did the treatments, and then calculate when her milk is going to be okay to go back to milking with the regular herd, and then when her meat would be okay if she was going to go to be a beef cow. So all the animal caretakers, we have meetings all the time to monitor the health of the cows and keep everybody up to date on what those operating procedures are to treat cows. So we're trying to manage from the front side, make sure the animals are treated and managed in a way to prevent illness, and then identify and care for any animals right away. So we've got a lot of monitoring on those cows to be able to find a cow immediately when something goes on, something happens. So when an animal needs medical care, we're all trained to follow the right protocols to get her away from the general herd and start treatment the right way. So make sure that the most effective treatment is used based on medical science and the experience of us on the farm, and then also the veterinarian if we need her assistance in doing some treatments. And every cow is important. That's really the most important thing, is making sure that each cow is taken care of really well. So we collect individual data and diagnostics used to make sure that each girl has got a good treatment plan that's going to be followed. And some of you may know anyways, but at least at Aurora Ridge, all our cows, we monitor their production, milk components, rumination monitoring. So the part of her stomach that mixes up the feed and kind of helps digestion. We've got monitoring on that we use on each individual cow, monitor activity. And then we do quite a bit of culture-based treatments. So take a lot of samples on cows, almost daily, send in samples down to Cornell to get cultures done so that we do the right treatment on any cow that has got some sort of illness. And I think the most important part of that really is these farms are quite large. We milk a lot of cows, but the most important thing, like I said, is the individual cow. So having data on every cow makes it so that okay, you've got a lot of cows out there, but you're not worried about all those cows that are making a lot of milk, have high components, good rumination, good activity, all that. You're worried about that cow that has some sort of deviation. So if her milk production is down, components are wrong, if her rumination has fallen off, there's several times a day we'll go out and bring in those cows or do a physical on a cow to figure out what's going on that's making that production or some change that we can find.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. There's a lot. You know more about each of your cows than I probably know about either of my children. All right. So with that, we're going to head into manure. And so we've got Greg, who's going to share with us some of the technology and systems that farms are using for manure.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Greg Raymond from Sunnyside Farms in the big booming town of Venice Center. Everyone's favorite subject is manure. So I was late to the meeting deciding who was going to do what, and Kelly beat me to the crop side. So I'm here talking about manure. So what is manure? It's a nutrient-rich byproduct of animal agriculture composed of animal feces and urine, bedding, wasted feed, water from stock tanks, evaporative cooling systems, and sanitation processes like washing the milking system. And in New York, manure is typically scraped from barn floors to collection pits. You get out in the Western US and they'll have more open lots, different types of systems. Some barns have a flush system, but typically in New York, it's scraped into a pit and collected. The environmental benefits of manure application. Manure actually builds the soil. People have known this for literally thousands of years. It increases the soil carbon, improves soil structure, water holding capacity, and therefore increases the infiltration. Because it does all that, it'll reduce erosion, runoff, and associated nutrient loss. Kind of think of it as a sponge. If you add manure and cover crops each year, it just keeps building the soil. So it's like having a brand new sponge. And over time, if you stop, as the sponge gets old, it doesn't hold as much water. And it's the same thing with the soil. So manure is very valuable. Reduces the need for energy intensive synthetic fertilizers. Last couple of years, price of commercial, I call it commercial fertilizer, has been record highs, and we're probably anywhere from 50 to 90% less purchased commercial fertilizer on our farm because of the manure that we use. And so it improves soil health, and every field is different. It's kind of like the cows, Dan, we're talking about. Every field has its own records and how much manure you put on from which source. So it's not a one size fits all program. Manure storages can be a hot topic at times. Actually, if everyone just looks out the window right now, this is exactly why we have numerous manure storages located around the farm. If we didn't, and we had a daily spread, we'd be out there 2 hours ago and first thing tomorrow morning. So these storages that we have are absolutely critical to help protect the environment. So all the different types of manure storages are engineered. Can you go back, Kirsten? So we store the manure, and when we say manure, it has the milking center waste and feed leachate waste in there as well. Yeah, that's good. Each manure system is as unique as a cow. I guess I got to help ahead of myself there. Every farm has different goals and resources that influence their manure management. Some farms manage raw manure, which is simply just that comes out of the cow, goes into some sort of short-term or long-term storage, and then it's spread on the fields. Some farms use separation equipment that separates the liquids from the solids. And some use some more advanced treatment systems, and some truck or tanker manure to the fields, and others pump manure directly to the fields through dragline system. And the solid liquid separation, that's actually a picture. I think that's Jason down there taking some samples at our farm. We've been separating manure for, it's got to be 12 years or so, 12, 13 years. After the digester, it's the liquids and the solids are separated, and we reuse the digested solids for bedding for the animals. Makes a wonderful bedding, and we're not bringing in, I think we're up, I don't even know how many semi-loads. We'd probably be close to 10 semi-loads a week of sawdust or other imported bedding that we actually make on our own now. Some advantages of separating the solids, reduces the total volume in manure storages because you're taking all those solids out. Solids can accumulate in manure systems, they'll settle out. So by taking them out, they won't settle. And you can compost it or do all other kinds of stuff with it. When you compost, you're treating the manure aerobically. You're just tumbling it and heating it with oxygen, and that generates nutrient-rich, stable fertilizer that you can use for land application. Some people bag it and sell it. Pheasants over in King Ferry have been doing that for for a very long time. Anaerobic digestion, like I was saying, we built the digester at the same time as the separators. I think we've got to be at least 12 years into it. It greatly reduces the odor of the manure, and the biogas can be converted into electricity or compressed natural gas. And so the digester is basically just an extension of the cow's stomach. You heat the manure up to 101 degrees. It stays in there for roughly 3 weeks with no oxygen. And the methane is just naturally released. You don't have to add any other stuff to it. It's just manure, and just releases methane, and we capture that and run it through generators. Remote storages, just like out the window tonight, gives you additional storage capacity when field conditions are unsuitable for spreading, like right now. It puts it in a good position, generally in the middle of a bunch of different fields for spring and fall applications, or sometimes in the middle of summer on growing grass or alfalfa fields. And it greatly reduces the truck and tractor traffic and mud on the roads during the spring and fall application periods like we used to. So they're a good thing. A couple different ways you can apply manure. One of the oldest ones is broadcasting. It's simple, inexpensive, can be used during almost any season. Most of our manure we incorporate with a dragline system, but we do surface spread on grass and alfalfa fields during the summer. That's about there's some new technology out there that's gonna help with this, that we can use the dragline system, but for right now, we just spread it on top. So putting the nutrients out there when we need it. And then injecting manure, it's more expensive. There's just a ton of equipment behind the tractor and the hose. There's pumps and miles of hose. Can take a little bit longer depending on the field setup, requires more horsepower because you're incorporating the manure, but it minimizes the odor, retains the nutrients, mixes it in the soil, so the nutrients will bind the soil particles and reduces the risk of runoff. And substantially reduce the traffic associated with manure hauling, just because you're running a pump, pushing the manure through a hose instead of taking it over the road. Next one. That's it for me.
Awesome. Nice job, Greg. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about our fields and our soils and how we grow crops and how that relates to water quality. And we have Kelly O'Hara here to share with us. And listen close, because whenever Kelly talks, I feel like I want to write down a little quote that he said that's really important. So thanks, Kelly.
Sure. Thanks, Kirsten. So yeah, I'm Kelly O'Hara from Oakwood Dairy in Auburn. We, as a third generation farmer, I can attest that we are connected to the land and the water and the stewardship of those resources. So whether it was my grandfather Ward or my father Ted explaining to me, the individual characteristics of each field that makes up our farm. And I'd also like to note that our farm as it sits today, previously was about 25 individual farms, and each of those small farms, used to be a farmhouse and a barn that maybe had 8, 10, or 15 cows a piece in them. And so over the years, we've combined those individual operations into one. And so, I've always wondered, do we actually have more cows on our land than what used to be there? And there probably are some, but in many cases, there's really not many more cows than what used to be. It's just now they're housed in one location. So, basically our sustainability as a family business depends on healthy soil, water, and air. And so we spend every day on the land, and we know it like our cows and our people. I can tell my employees when they're going out to a field, I'll say, look in that back corner. If that back corner is dry, then the rest of the field is good. Or, if they're going out to pick stones, I'll say, go find, this section of the field, and I'll point out on a field map, there used to be a hedgerow there. That's where you're going to pick all the stones. So we really do know our land. So we spend a lot of time, energy, labor, and money on protecting the environment. And environmental sustainability, it's a core value, but it's also a key economic driver for our businesses. We strive for continuous improvement. What we do this year isn't what we're going to do next year. We're going to continue to adapt. So how can agriculture impact water quality? Two of the major ways are erosion of soil into the waterways and also runoff and leaching. So both of these are losses of our most precious resources on the farm. So our businesses could not remain economically competitive or profitable if these losses of these valuable resources become too great. So that's why we take a lot of steps to minimize these losses. The soil structure and soil health, as kind of identified in this chart, soil is comprised of 50% solid particles and 50% pore space. So of the 50% that is pore space, half of that space is holding water and the other half is filled with air. And that air is critical to support biological activity that's necessary in a healthy soil. So, but it also creates a reservoir for holding extra rainfall so that it doesn't become runoff. And, we don't have to look much more than an hour ago to understand that, when a front comes through and there's a wall of water coming, somehow we need to create a reservoir to hold that extra water in our soil profile. So one of the tools that allows us to do that would be tile drainage. And so these diagrams really do a nice job showing the effect on the free water level and root growth in our crops. So when water is close to a crop as it establishes and starts growing in the spring season, you can have shallow roots that then will affect the plant growth the rest of the summer and affect your overall yield of that crop. So tile drainage helps us maintain healthy soils by increasing the reservoir available to hold rainfall from storm events. Tile drainage, it really affects the early season root growth, results in higher yields and more efficient uptake of water and nutrients. So by preventing soils from becoming saturated, we reduce erosion, reduce compaction, which compaction would reduce those pore spaces that are available for water and or oxygen, and also nutrient loss. So tiling is a very important conservation tool for us. Since we're talking about tiling, we'd like to invite everyone to participate in a seminar that we're having with some experts presenting research and findings on tile drainage on farms. It'll be happening April 18th. There'll be both in-person and virtual options. It's happening at the County Soil and Water Conservation Service District office on County House Road. So we'd invite everyone to learn about tiles and how this key conservation practice helps us build resiliency to intense storm events. I think that tile is misunderstood, and it's very similar to the way that manure storages were initially misunderstood. So getting educated on tile drainage on how tile drainage protects water quality is going to be very important, because right now people talk about, tile and discharge, but they're not understanding the reduction in surface runoff and erosion and the carrying of nutrients that tile helps prevent. So we take care of our land and water with nutrient management, with manure storage and timing of application, our best management practices, and also we learn from each other. There's been systems that Greg has done on his farm and Dan has done on their farm that, we will either adopt those and try them, or we'll go to something else. And so we communicate. We've really come a long way. Progress has been made, but we understand that what's good enough now might not be good enough for the next storm event. And so we're going to continue to adapt. And every year we try multiple new practices or use of new technology to continue to improve. So nutrient management planning, it's a pretty broad scope, but with the way it pertains to our field activities, basically we're looking at the land application of manure and fertilizer. We write a nutrient prescription based on the crop needs, and that's on a field by field basis, and even broken out into sectors within fields. A lot of our fields have different soil types with different fertility levels, different types of a yield index that would allow a greater yield given more nutrients or less nutrients. So we're setting a very precise prescription of how we apply nutrients within each field. We also observe spreading setbacks. There's soil conservation practices, and then all of this has a lot of record keeping that goes into it. Most of that is what's regulated through the New York State DEC and our CAFO plans. At the farmstead, we've got our feed management areas, our feed storage areas, our milking center, our barnyards, our manure handling, the way we deal with mortalities. There's been a lot of updates to our barnyards and our farmstead areas, and many of those are very expensive. Sometimes they really don't result in operational efficiency or profitability gains. They truly become a sunk cost or lost capital. So as other farms, especially smaller farms, are going to need to adopt some of these practices, it really is going to be an expensive undertaking for them. Also shown is this nutrient cycle, and our goal is to close that loop. And the most sustainable model for the farm and the watershed is when the losses from that cycle are minimized. So that's what all of these efforts are trying to accomplish. I also want to mention with our nutrient management plan, back when CAFO regulations first came into being, our consultant fees for the developing, the updating, the record keeping part of that CAFO plan. Previously, we always had paid for soil analysis and recommendations on nutrients because that made good economic sense. And we spent about $18,000 a year on our farm for that consulting and expertise. When we went to the required CAFO planning, the amount of additional engineering and design and oversight and just basically, our certified nutrient management planner spending, very an intense amount of time developing our plan, our annual cost went to about $42,000 a year on just the consulting fee. And that's a continual cost because each year we've got our record keeping and review and then our updates, and that changes according to our crop rotations. So manure, with all that said, manure is a valuable resource. So this picture does demonstrate an example of the effect of manure nutrients on a corn crop. This particular picture shows where there was not manure applied, where a drag hose system was turned and did not put the prescribed amount of manure on that corn crop. So there's a visible, but also a measurable, the use of our yield monitors, other equipment that we have in our harvesting equipment can show that there was, a yield loss from not having that. So the manure definitely benefits the crops and the soil health, as Greg had talked about earlier. The yield benefits go beyond the nutrient content because it's also the carbon. When you add carbon, when you build organic matter in your soil, if you were to raise the organic matter level of the soil 0.1%, each acre of soil could hold an additional 10,000 gallons of water. So again, in a storm event like tonight, if you had high organic level soils, you can hold more water before it becomes runoff. And that would be our goal. So recycling our nutrients on the farm, it's good for the watershed health, and it certainly reduces the nutrients imported into the watershed. So Greg kind of covered this. Progress has been made on how we apply manure. Dragline application of manure, it reduces compaction. So that's a key point of soil health. It's the structure of your soil, having those large pores, those macro pores that can hold water and hold air and hold carbon, hold organic matter. By removing those heavy tankers and trucks off of our fields, the reduction in compaction really aids in us building our soil health and our water retention ability. And ultimately, that's our resiliency to the storm events. Also, we found on our farm that pumping the manure through the dragline system was energy efficient. Our overall fuel use is down compared to trucking or tank spreading with tractors. Almost 50% our fuel use was reduced. So it's good an energy efficient practice as well. So our soil conservation BMPs, or best management practices, there's a lot of them that we all use, from strip cropping to grass waterways, buffers and cover crops, reduced tillage. Reduced tillage, really, that's to conserve carbon and build organic matter. Excluding livestock from waterways is something that we've been regulated for years on, but a lot of smaller farms, most have gone away from that. There are a few more instances that need to be held accountable. Reducing compaction, increasing infiltration, kind of talked about that. But then our crop rotation. Dairy farms, due to the diets that we feed our cows, and cows need different types of fiber and energy. So that results in us planting perennial crops such as alfalfa or grass. And typically that's about 40% of our acreage on our farm. So at Oakwood Dairy, that means that 1,600 acres out of our 4,000 crop acres is in a continuous 100% ground covered crop. And that really aids in not only reducing erosion, but the infiltration and water filtration of precipitation, as it hits our soil surfaces. So that's something that provides year-round soil holding and water filtration performance. So certainly a healthy soil that produces a high quality, high yielding crop is the best case scenario for all of our farms and the watershed.
Thank you, Kelly. So with that, I just want to share a little bit. I hope what you've heard from Dan and Greg and Kelly, right, is not only their dedication and sort of ethic, but also their reliance on data and information. And I'm, of course, biased working for Cornell University, but we feel like that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and the farms here tonight do too. And so I just wanted to share with you just a few numbers so you understood how valuable it is to farmers. So we rely, and this is just for my program on the nutrient management side. You saw the model that Dan shared with CNCPS, the feeding model. We have the same thing in our manure models and the work that Jason's doing, measuring nutrient content and greenhouse gas emissions. But just in the nutrient side, we have about 230,000 acres of corn yield data that farmers have shared with us so that we can create better nitrogen management. We've been able to fine tune our yield index as well as our nitrogen application rates. So that was really important. We also had a pretty important, it's an older study, but still super important about whether or not farms need phosphorus starter and when they need it. I'm hoping to really narrow down that application rate, and that included about 67 farms that participated in that on-farm research trial. Every year with the Nutrient Management Sphere program, just around 100 farms participate in our whole farm nutrient mass balance program, where they measure their inputs and their exports and see how well their farm balances. And just last year with the Nutrient Management Sphere program, we had 172 on-farm research sites participating in about 8 or 9 projects. So this is not something new. They've been participating and truly actually driving the research we do at Cornell University, asking us really hard questions that then we work really hard to try and answer, not only for the farm's benefit, but for the community's benefit. So we really appreciate that partnership. And I think with that, if we have any discussion or questions, I saw a few popping up in the chat. I think we're ready for that. I know we went a little long, but it was good info, so.
Well, that was great to everybody. That's just fascinating to me. I've learned so much here tonight. I'm just going to start at the top here and work down through the questions. Anne asked, do farms have labs on site to measure and monitor key elements and rudiment monitoring and milk components, or does everything get sent to Cornell?
Yeah, so some farms will have some on site. So initially, early on when I started the dairy, we did have incubator on site, and we'd use blood agar plates to try to see what would grow to speciate some of the things or bacteria that we're treating with the cows. We are lucky enough to just be a half an hour from Cornell, so we have a pickup, a 7-day-a-week pickup for any samples that we need results on that get taken down to the diagnostic lab. So with all the technology they have there, they can do such a specific job and tell us exactly what kind of bacteria we're working with or what we've got going on. It's easy enough to just submit samples that way. As far as rumen monitoring of the cows, that's live data that we get from every cow that's always available on the computer. So basically we just monitor that and look for deviation. So if a cow normally ruminates for 400 minutes a day and today she ruminated for 300 minutes a day, it's going to tell you that she's down 25%. You should probably go take a look at her. So a lot of that data is live right on the farm, and we can monitor it throughout the day to look for any issues that we got to go check.
Okay, thank you. A long question from Julie. Over the past 10 years, it feels like she's noticed fewer hedgerows and heard about things like stream straightening and tiling going right to the roadside ditches. How do these procedures affect conservation or valuable soil and nutrients? She can see that you might gain more square footage or acreage, but potentially lose some of that to erosion. Anybody want to comment on that?
Kelly, you got it?
Yeah, so with hedgerow removal, some of that just allows us to gain the efficiencies in some of our technologies, like with the drag line. It's difficult to use that in small areas of land. So, if we take out a hedgerow, and if there happens to be an issue like with slope length, maybe that's why the hedgerow was there. We can put in and install things such as a wasp cob, a water and sediment control basin, and we'll grab that water partway down the slope and put it into a tile underground where it stays clean, and then follows the topography of the land and gets to the bottom of that slope without picking up soil or causing erosion. So also maybe that hedgerow was there because there was a spring and it was always wet, and so by going around that wet hole years and years and years, trees and brush grew up, and so by tiling and fixing that issue, we create more productive land. As far as tiles going to the road ditches, I think, again, it's part of the educational process of what tile is and how it works. but we only put tile in areas that become saturated. We're trying to reduce saturated soils. Saturated soils is what basically leads to erosion. And so a lot of the concerns with the watershed are erosion based, where soil nutrients, leave our fields. So if we put that water into a road ditch that is designed to handle water, without that water traversing across the entire field, picking up soil and nutrients, it should inherently be cleaner. And one thing also, if you think about when a field gets saturated with water and there's water standing, every drop that comes after that point is going to run off. Drain tiles are about 3 feet underground. So that provides that soil, that 3 feet of soil, it provides quite a bit of filtering of that rainwater by the time it gets to the tile. And so really we're not going to change the amount of water that comes in these storm events. But if we can handle it in a way that either reduces the length of the slope or reduces the distance that it would travel over saturated surfaces carrying, soil particles with erosion, then we can really affect water quality.
And in
Thank
terms
you.
of like setbacks from edges of ditches and things like that, so farms that have a comprehensive nutrient management plan have to take all of those setbacks into account and identify where each of those drainages might end up and how much of a buffer or setback they might need. So a farm that doesn't have a CNMP might not understand those setbacks. So it's hard to say on any specific field or farm what's going on, but often there's more than meets the eye to know what's going on there. And maybe most of the field actually isn't draining that way, or maybe they've buffered around where the field water does leave that field and it's somewhere not going right into that ditch. Often our fields don't drain directly into the ditch for the whole border, but maybe in one spot. And so we put our setbacks in those areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And we're always managing for that erosion piece, right? To try and minimize that as much as possible.
I've watched one farm in particular, and I'm blanking on the road. It's near Everest Park, so near Wasco Hamlet. That's done some pretty amazing things with wascobs and with crop rotation and contouring. And I think that's awesome, and it's really exciting to watch that. I've just also seen many fields just driving around the area where the stuff comes right up to the edge, and you can see where the water goes in, and it's the water tells you where it goes, right?
Yeah, and that's
I was
that's
here.
the piece. We all, it's a
Yeah.
big lift, and there's lots of fields and lots of operators and lots of opportunity for education and improvement. And we're always looking, how can we do a better job across the board? So
And I try to do the same with my own smaller property. So I can't imagine trying to do it for 4,000 acres. It's very exciting to see the land being used in all these different ways. I wanted to thank everybody that works so hard on that.
And I saw your question, Julie, about soils and soils history. If you want to shoot me a message with your contact information, I can follow up with you on that. But I can say too, in terms of both the hedgerows and the soil cover piece, right? If we look at the Northeast in general, we've actually increased our forest land over the last 200 years. We did a really great job deforesting, and we're doing, a pretty good job of reforesting our land too. And actually, New York dairy farms hold quite a bit of woodland in comparison to, farmers as a whole across the country, and even other dairy farmers across the country. So we do have that as a strength going for us, is that they tend to maintain more biodiverse habitat on those farm acres.
Okay, Ann has another question. Is strip tilling better than no-till to improve compaction and aerate the soil and improve water filtration?
I'm happy to take a stab at that, but I'm going to defer to my farmers first.
I'd say it depends.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to say. So essentially, at the end of the day, right, like when we are not doing complete soil inversion or soil destruction through things like discs and chisels and things that destroy soil structure, we're going to gain. And so just like all our cows are different, all our fields and soils are different, so is our equipment. I think there's a role for a lot of different kinds of conservation tillage, and you just described 2, and there's probably, you know, a dozen. So like Greg said, you can probably talk about when strip tilling might be better than no-till in a particular situation.
And it's tough. If it was a straight cash crop operation, it would be a lot more controllable, but with the manure application, you'd almost have to surface spread if you're going to no-till, or there's other types of, you know, minimal type injection, but we have a lot of racks. So as soon as you have a shallow mixing of the soil, it's going to pluck up just millions of tons of racks. So every farm, every situation is different. But if you could just wave your magic wand and go to no-till, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I would also add that one of our challenges as dairy farms is to produce this high quality feed to keep our animals healthy. So that entails us waiting until just the right point of, you know, crop maturity to harvest that crop. So too many times, you know, we'll have a dry summer, and then next thing you know, we'll get all of our rain caught up in the fall and we have a wet harvest. And so people will say to me, why in the world did you guys wait until it started raining to go harvest your crop? And I said, well, we were waiting for the crop to be at the right moisture content, so that when we ensile it, it ferments correctly, so that we have healthy cows and that they'll eat it. And so sometimes in doing that, we go out and we destroy our fields, and then we have to mechanically fix and restore them. And we really don't have a choice, because again, it's the crop, the maturity that we have to wait for, because we're making feed. And so our forage is, you know, it's a lot different than a grain crop. Again, Greg mentioned a crop farm maybe has some options. You know, they're not going to go out in the rain and harvest, and so they can stay off their fields and you know, not cause rutting. And so, you know, maybe strip cropping, no-till works there. So we'd like to have that work, and you know, with the use of cover crops, also, you know, temperature. If we have good hard freezes in the wintertime, it helps break up compaction that's caused, you know, by our harvesting and other activities on the field. But, you know, recently we haven't had the cold temperatures that really, you know, do a lot of that work for us. So, so yeah, it's a challenge.
And I think probably the 3 farmers and others on this call would say that as their soil health has improved, they've seen that cycle get better, so that the soil is more resilient. And they can do more and more of these practices over time.
I might just add that they're not mutually exclusive. You can no-till and strip till together. And it's probably strip tilling is challenging to you know, match your equipment and your sprayers. But it really does help cut down on erosion.
Thank you, everybody. Another one from Ann, getting back to tiling. There was mention of tiling improves soil health. Does anyone measure the nutrients coming from the tiles to the road ditch after manure injection? And then second question, does anyone use bio plugs on the tiles?
And it's like I planted you to invite people to our workshop. So yes, people do measure that and are doing research on that. A lot of the original research on tile drains and water quality came out of the Midwest, which is a slightly different system, often grain, often not related to manure, different soil types, big, you think fields here are big, these are big fields that are flat and square. And so the folks that we have coming on April 18th are here from the Northeast. Laura Clivers from New York, is doing her research here in New York, and Joshua Faulkner is doing his work in Vermont around Lake Champlain. So they're going to come and share their research results, and they've really been focusing in on that interaction of manure and tile, as well as sort of field-based practices and tile. And to get to that sort of follow-up question about plugging tiles, they're going to talk about some of the sort of treatment and remediation techniques available to us, and I'll probably touch on that here with our slopes. the way, I'm not a hydrologist, Joshua Faulkner is. But I've hung around him enough to know, right, like with slope, we get enough pressure and head pressure coming from that water that if we were to plug those up, right, that water would still need to go somewhere, it could back up and actually pop out through the surface where we don't want it, causing some problems. So they have some other alternatives that they're looking at in terms of treatment and saturated buffers and some other things. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely sign up. I think I saw Emma put a link in the chat to register for that workshop. And if you can't come in person, we invite you to please sign up to come online, and we will be recording that as well. So it's going to be a longer day. It's going to be a 2-hour workshop.
Sounds fantastic. A question from Susan. How much loss in production is there in grass-fed milk?
I'm going to look at Dan while I look up a study for you.
Yeah, so I don't have a particular number in mind. I would say that probably a variety of feedstuffs, if it's grass or alfalfa, corn, the things that we're feeding to the cows, probably a good variety would all contribute to a good diet for those cows. Some different plants are going to contribute different nutrients. So we mix corn, alfalfa, and grass in our diets, and don't limit particular to just grass fed.
Yeah, so often we see production will go down. That is not the most efficient system. You can feed a healthy, feed a cow and create a healthy cow a lot of ways. I like to remind people that corn silage is actually grass. It's just a warm season, big fat grass. But there's a lot of ways we can do that through pasture and hay crops, as well as our forages and grain crops. But we do lose some efficiency there. And so I put a link in there to my colleagues at University of Vermont who have been doing some ongoing work looking at that, both the production side of things, but also the economics. And I think that they'll tell you that that's not a system you jump into lightly. It's a very, you need to make that decision carefully and with a really good management setup, because when you're relying 100% on high energy and high quality forages to make milk, you have to have a lot of them and you have to have a lot of high quality. So the acres per cow ends up going up pretty significantly. And so there's some of the costs, which is why you would pay extra for that particular product, like say at a supermarket.
Yeah, and a lot depends on your location as well. If you're located on a huge tract of land with no roads around, you might be able to do it a little bit better than some of us that are, kind of squeezed in by roads. You'd have to have a easy pass for the cows to get across the road.
Yeah, there would definitely be a decrease in production. And so for us here, where we're regulated to have animals in buildings and under roofs and, out of the elements, that drives our cost up. And so we need higher production to cover our operation costs. And a lot of these costs are just driven by regulation.
Okay, this is fantastic. I think that's all we've got for questions so far. Is there any more questions out there?
And just listening to you, and thank you so much. I have learned a lot. I'm thinking of the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. And I hope that people consider becoming certified nutrient managers, because there is such a future there and everyone is needing it, especially with all these regulations and plans that are being required on you. You can't be a farmer, because you have to be in there trying to manage all that. So I hope FFA is doing something about that.
Well, and we had 35 people sitting in a room downstairs here in Morrison Hall yesterday, today, and tomorrow, learning how to become those certified nutrient management planners. So there's hope.
Perfect. See, we're on the same wavelength. There has to be. There's just so much technology out there, and trying to apply it in the right way. And, as you were sharing with the nutrient cycle and closing that cycle, yes, the cow is eating, but the cow is pooping. And how do you manage all that and get it back on the land so you can be growing the crops to do that? I also I learned a lot about the improvement of a healthy soil, and, how in taking some of those practices you can improve your yield, you can improve the quality of the food that you're growing, be it for your cow or for humans, you know, for that consumption there too. So awesome. I
just-
want to thank you. I don't know, any other questions?
I just wanted to
Oh.
thank you again. It makes me, listening to all the things you do, you had to be such Renaissance people or such, you know, generalists, but also specialists in many different areas. And it makes me think of NASA and all the machines they are sending up into space. I might think, I've gone to a couple of the tours of some of the farms in the past, and I felt like I was watching, you know, moon launches almost. Just the complexity
Yeah.
is really astounding, and I hats off to you.
And I hope
Thanks for
that
caring.
we're planning some on-site farm visits. I know some of us over the years have gotten to some, but there's so much out there, and we definitely want to be promoting that to our members and to the general public so that they have a better understanding. I mean, we live in the same community and we are neighbors, and we need to find ways to, you know, help each other and still improve our watershed and the quality of our surface water, being our drinking water and source for recreational use too. So awesome. Thank you so much. I know we're going to want you guys back again and just to hear more, and appreciate your time, your interest. There are several messages here within the chat box of you know, who to contact, different studies. So again, thank you so much. Applaud you. See some handshakes and clapping going on here, but appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann, for everything that Aula does and that you do. We really appreciate it, and we really look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. It's important.
Yeah, over the years, Ann, I think Aula has been a group that's been willing to open their minds and come to the farms and learn and listen and understand, you know, the struggle that we face is kind of the same, you know, concerns that you all have too. So.
Yeah, and you know, I think you guys are the leading farmers here, and people look to you to learn what you've done, to learn from where you struggled, and it helps them now incorporate new management style and, you know, practices within their farms. So it's such a win-win, and that's why, you know what, we live in one of the best places in the world, okay? And our soils are great, water is great, and yeah, I like it that we get together, we get along. So good deal. I think we're ready, huh? Unless any more accolades. No, okay. Thank you again. Have a good evening, everybody. Stay well, and we'll see you next time.
All right,
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yep.